You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Hi, I'm Annie in America.
And I'm Johanna in Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast that talks about murder, mystery, and the macabre, and very, very often about history. Because I'd say that's one of our biggest passions, right, Annie?
Absolutely. This topic has kind of all three. There's murder, a lot of macabre. It's very historic. It's exciting. Before we start, I would love to give a huge shout out to our newest Patreon member, Bridget Bauer. Thank you. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast and helping to keep the lights on, so to speak, over here. If you would like to know more about how you can support us, not only financially, but, morally speaking. Morally, is that it's moral support, right? Yeah, that's the term. Please listen to the end. This is probably the time I should warn everybody, as I'm trying to remember the phrase moral support, that I have a pretty intense migraine today. Pain is well managed. Brain is struggling a little bit. And there's also a big thunderstorm happening right now. And I know I say this all the time, and occasionally we'll get somebody saying, Annie, stop apologizing for noises we can't hear. Like it's an annoying part. But the one time I don't is the time you will hear it, and Johanna can't edit it out of the background. So
yep.
The rain is really hitting the window in such a pleasing manner. But I don't know how it's going to read if you can hear it on your end.
As Annie said, listen until the end, because that's when we'll tell you all about the next live streams for our Patreon members, for example. Now, anyway, it's time to hear more, and I'm so excited, about a man I knew barely anything, but who has honestly occupied a lot of my brain over the last week. I immediately went and told my husband about the fact that James Garfield was not only ambidextrous, but that he could write Latin with one hand and Greek with the other at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
My mind is still blown, and I can't wait to hear more. And I'm sure you have more fascinating facts for me, and not only for me, but for our listeners out there today, right?
I really hope so. As I already suspected, this is going to be part 2 of 3. So last week we discussed Garfield's early life and how he met his wife, their background. And today we're going to talk about the killer before we get into the absolutely horrific event of the assassination itself next week. This is going to be a part 2 of 3, everybody.
So yeah, just a little recap, really, really little teeny tiny recap. Please go back and listen to the other episode if you haven't already. But last week we discussed Garfield's rise from his birth as, I would argue, probably one of the poorest presidents America has ever had.
Yep.
To being a remarkable scholar, university professor, and then president of what is today Hiram College. Then he was a general in the Union Army. He became a congressman at the request of Abraham Lincoln himself, and was a senator-elect when he finally was nominated for president as a dark horse compromise candidate at the RNC. And that's how he became a presidential candidate without ever having run for political office or wanting any of that. And we discussed what a loving and involved father he was with his 7 children, and how deeply he and his wife Creed felt the loss of little Eliza Arabella, who they called Trot, or Little Trot, and their son Edward, who they called Neddy. We also talked about how after a rocky beginning to their marriage, they really found themselves in a truly loving and respecting relationship. And that's pretty much where we ended last week, more or less.
That's perfect. And I'll have more reminders as we sort of go through this one, because of course I kept finding different and interesting quotes that I was like, I should mention that because now they'll know what I'm talking about. But Garfield himself, as we said last week, he never actually sought power of any kind, which is probably what made him such a good leader and natural leader. He'd gone to the RNC to support Sherman as candidate for the Republican Party for president. Early on in the Civil War, Garfield, the general, had been pretty extreme in his views in terms of sort of beating the South to its knees and had spoken on seizing Southern estates. But as time passed, he'd become a little bit less extreme and understood the importance of compromise in going forward with the country's reconstruction post-Civil War. There's a great article by Justice Donachie. He's a professor emeritus and historian who's written some wonderful pieces on Garfield. His first name is Justice. The last name is Doenecke. So thank you very much.
I just thought he's a judge.
Initially, that was my first thought, and I think that's his first name, which actually comes into play next week. Not this particular gentleman, but just names as professions. So Donachie writes for the Miller Center, this is an excerpt from that article, quote, "Though he bore the cross of dullness, Sherman might emerge as the ideal compromise candidate. Garfield nominated Sherman. The convention deadlocked through the next 33 ballots, with Grant leading, followed by Blaine and Sherman. Throughout the convention balloting, Garfield had received 1 or 2 courtesy votes on each roll call. On the 34th ballot, Wisconsin cast 16 votes for Garfield. Wisconsin's like, I've had it. This is enough. Let's just, The move became a stampede, and on the 36th ballot, as the Blaine and Sherman forces rallied to the Ohio congressman who had been elected by the Ohio state legislature to the U.S. Senate just prior to the Republican convention. Which is meaning to say he got so many votes that even the main people that he'd gone to support were like, no, actually, you have it. Garfield won 399 votes to Grant's 306, putting him over the top and giving him the Republican nomination. End quote. I kind of glossed over it last week, but that's a more historically accurate accounting of it than I had previously told. There are also a couple of quotes by Garfield and his wife Crete that I wanted to share with you today to remind you what their relationship was like before we move on to the villain of the story. This is an excerpt from a letter from James to Lucretia, dated November 24, 1867. Quote, "Precious darling." So that's how he addresses her. "It is nearly 10 o'clock Sunday night, and I will not lie down to sleep till I have told you again that I love you. We no longer love because we ought to, but because we do. The tyranny of our love is sweet. We waited so long for this coming, but he has come to stay." End quote. That's a nice letter to get from your husband, isn't it?
Especially after having been married for a while already.
I think that's something that you and I really appreciate, right? This importance of keeping that feeling alive as the years pass, right?
Absolutely.
So then we have a letter from Crete dated February 23rd, 1868, and she addresses him as, quote, "My dearest life." And then she goes on to write, "My darling precious one, when I stop to think, and I do very often, how priceless is the gift of your great love, my soul lays hold of strong and holy purposes. When I look into the faces of our darling little ones and take home to my heart the thought that they are ours, yours as well as mine, they seem to me so sacred. They all love you so much." End quote. The last quote is from Garfield's diary. This is dated November 11, 1875. Quote, "If I could find the time and had the ability to write out the story of Crete's life and mine, the long and anxious questionings that preceded and attended the adjustment of our lives to each other, and the beautiful results we long ago reached and are now enjoying, it would be a more wonderful record than any I know in the realm of romance." End quote. Which is just, it's like I was saying, I found that quote and I was like, oh, that's what I was saying last week. It's like a real true life love story, their story. How is there not a movie about Garfield yet? Like,
right?
This needs to be, Garfield the cat needs to step aside. Like, I love him. I love him. But Garfield the man has been overshadowed for just way too long. And it's not just his story. It is their story, because she has been beside her husband as his, even when they weren't necessarily doughy-eye in love in the early days, he still respected her mind, sought her advice. She has always been his closest and most trusted advisor. And that is a rare thing. Not an impossible thing, but, you know. at this time for a man to treat a woman with that much respect. And it just makes me glad to know he's accomplished so much in his life, because obviously we all know his death is coming far too soon. And I mean, really, to have been born in a cabin with a dirt floor and through hard work and dedication to become educated, serve your country, find true love, have children. If the game of life is a game, he won. You know, I say this all the time when we lose people. It's like, we can't look at how much time they had here. Just look at how many blessings they had for the short time, because it's always too short. He's just remarkable. He's the literal embodiment of the American dream.
Yeah, I think he's one of these example. No, I'm not going to say it because that's a whole political, but this whole pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, like he's this kind of guy. And that's, as you say, the American dream. And that's the idea that people in the US still have, but that's not obtainable.
It's not attainable
easily anymore.
No, it's not. No, I don't think that's necessarily a political statement. I think that's a fact, isn't it? That times have changed. It is no longer.
Because here in Europe at the same time, we had aristocracy, right?
Right.
And there was just no way for someone born poor to make his way up in the world like this.
Never, because of the class system.
Exactly. And that's also why a lot of people idealized and still idealize the United States, because it was possible over there. It was a young, new country where things were possible.
Yes, absolutely. It's getting harder and harder to realize the American dream, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Oh, I could talk about this with you all day. And not in a political sense. It's just, I don't know. Like, I think if you have two people in a household working 40-hour-a-week jobs, nobody should need to be on assistance. It's not really an anger with government. That's an anger with corporations and responsibility.
It's a worldwide problem.
Yeah, it is.
It's a worldwide problem.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. So now we're going to leave the Garfield family for a little bit. We're going to keep their tender, happy life sort of on the back burner. And we're going to go on to the life of one Charles Julius Guiteau. James and Crete are the heroines of our story, and Charles is the bad guy. Duh. Sorry, I couldn't not. Can I also say this about Charles? Charles's middle name was Julius, and he was called Julius by the family, but hated it because he thought that Julius was a black name. So,
has he ever heard about Julius Caesar?
That's who his brother said he was named after, but he said no, it wasn't Charles was so problematic in so many ways. But I don't think I ever mentioned how racist he is in all of this.
Also, I have to say, Julius here is a posh name, like for Nepo babies.
Yes.
Trust fund babies. Names are Julius.
We had a very, very popular chain of mall.
Yeah, Orange Juice.
Orange
right?
Julius. That's right. Orange Julius was like, you had cash if you went to Orange Julius. That was the status stop at the mall food court for sure. And I feel like perhaps the name has lost some of its charm on account of that. I was going to say cut that, but we really need to leave that in because Orange Julius is it even still around? Can you get it on the side at KFC or Taco Bell or something these days? Someone knows. All right. So Charles Julius Guiteau was born on September 8th, 1841 in Freeport, Illinois. He is the fourth of 6 children that are born to Jane and Luther Guiteau. Unlike the Garfields, the Guiteaus were pretty comfortable financially speaking, but they did not have a healthy, loving family life. I'm not going to get as detailed in the family history just because anytime we're talking about a murderer, does it make sense? I want to protect the privacy of the ancestors of a bad guy more than I do of the good people, right? This is a guy people might be trying to forget as part of their family. So I'm not going to get into all the various maiden names associated with them. But while Crete and James both grew up in very religious homes with very strong religious identities themselves, which was totally the norm, the Guiteau household was problematically religious and very physically and emotionally abusive. For example, Charles would be beaten if he wasn't praying correctly. Charles's mother, unfortunately, suffered from postpartum psychosis and died when he was only 7, and she was in her early 30s. There are indications that she was mentally ill for most of her adult life, and I wouldn't be surprised. We know a lot more about hormones and how that can cause serious problems these days, and so all of the mentions of her indicate what an incredibly difficult time she had psychologically after each birth, and so to have had so many children, do you know what I mean? I just, there isn't enough empathy in my body to send her away. So he's being raised by his father, who, as I said, beats him if he stutters, or really just anything he sees wrong with him. He thinks that corporal punishment is going to be the solution. Thankfully, he also has his sister, Frances, who helps to raise him. Charles himself suffered from very serious mental health problems. He had a very highly inflated sense of importance and an absolutely massive ego. This will become more and more clear as we discuss him, that Charles is not a mentally well man. I think the important thing to remember is that, unlike other cases we've covered, Charles plans things carefully. Charles fully understands the ramifications of all of his actions. He understands the difference between right and wrong. We're going to talk about this more probably next week. I just want to be clear that he does understand consequences, and our empathy for his struggles only goes so far, right? Like, you can feel empathetic for past trauma done to someone and also hold them to account for their actions. We talk all the time about how feelings about people and situations aren't mutually exclusive things, don't we? Like, you can be very sorry for someone and also want to make sure that they stay behind bars for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we say that all the time, but it's important to understand and to try to understand how and why things happen to be actually able and hopefully prevent them from happening again. If we all say, oh, but he was just a monster, he was a monster and there's nothing, then there would be never anything we could do about it. We just close our eyes and sing la la la.
That's right.
Because we wouldn't know anything. We wouldn't know to prevent anything. Can we prevent everything? No, of course not.
Exactly. That's why I liked studying psychology. It's that, how did this happen? And how, like you said, can it be prevented? All right. So Charles, he's getting older. When his grandfather dies, he's in his late teens, and Charles inherited $1,000, and he decides to go to the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. But when he gets there, he's like, hi, I'm here to attend your university. And they're like, great, here are the entrance exams. And then he failed them. So he had to do some more rudimentary studying in order to pass the exams. Then I think he gets in, but then leaves again before completing any kind of degree. He leaves because he decides to go to the new Oneida Community in New York, which was founded by John Humphrey Noyes, who Charles's father was a huge, huge fan of. John Humphrey Noyes was from a wealthy New England family, and he studied law at Dartmouth, but after graduating, he got swept up in a religious revival movement, decided to join the seminary and study theology rather than becoming a lawyer. At Yale, Noyes firmed up his belief that if you converted your beliefs to think the way he did, then with enough willpower, you could be freed of original sin and therefore be perfect. This was called perfectionism. So he announces that he is free of sin, he's done it, and the good people at the Yale Seminary said, "Good day, sir." And he was thrown out on his perfect ass. He travels around for a little bit and ends up setting up a group of Bible communists in Vermont. Bible communists. Sounds like a fun group, doesn't it?
How even? I mean, what made them...
We'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So things are okay for about 10 years, and then things take a turn in 1846 when the community who were living together in Putney, Vermont, decided to embrace complex marriage. So no more would members be joined in marriage to one another, but instead they considered all the men in the group to be married to all of the women.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Really? And they shared everything. I mean, that's the sense of Bible communism, in the sense that they all had their own spin which every group does, doesn't they, really? This was their own spin on how they perceived the Bible to be understood. Does this make sense, right? It's the same as any other.
Yeah, but I wonder where they got the idea
Right.
from.
Well, this is noise. It's right. So the women would wear trousers. I think a lot of women were drawn to these groups because they were given so much more freedom than women had outside of a group like this. Like, you could cut your hair short and wear comfortable trousers and ditch corsets. And there were a lot of...
I mean, I have to say, just from the thing you said, that they practiced free love in a sense where all men and women were like... Because usually we know it from cults where it's more like the men have all the freedom and the women are more like property, right?
Right. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but no, it was the opposite here. The focus was on the enjoyment and protection of the women. Very much so. Yeah, so free love is encouraged. And then in 1847, Noyes announces that he believes that the second coming of Christ had already happened. I think he thought it had already happened in like 1070 AD with the Temple of Jerusalem. So he believed that Christ had already returned, and the Spirit of Christ was with him and his people in Putney, Vermont. And so at this point, the surrounding community is like, I don't know about that. And they start to throw rocks. I mean, maybe literally, but they literally are, or not literally, are becoming hostile toward the community now. And so they need to leave Vermont because it's just not safe for them to be there anymore. They did okay with the plural marriage, but saying that Christ had chosen them, it was too much. So banished. So then they head to Oneida, New York, and that is where they flourish. And this is where Charles goes. This is the background of it. So now let's get into a few of the specific practices of the Oneida community. And yes, Oneida, like your knives and forks. Very, very popular brand of flatware. And this is, in fact, their origin story. So the Oneida community, they lived and worked together, men and women. They shared various chores equally, all the basic components of a sort of progressive, forward-thinking commune situation, right? So everybody's, people are tending gardens and planting food, and I think it was sort of where your skills and abilities lay, and so just your typical sort of commune. Where it starts to get a little different is, so they had a practice called mutual criticism. That is where each member would listen to the complaints. So they'd all get together. There's about 200 of them or so, and they live in this giant mansion house in upstate New York. And I believe the bedrooms themselves were all very small, because you wouldn't share a bedroom with anybody. You would just visit people for sex when you wanted it. And otherwise, you just went back to your own room and went to sleep. And so this is where you're sort of living. You're living and working with all these people. And regularly, they would get up for what they call mutual criticism, where you stand up and listen to everybody's complaints and criticisms that they have of you. So it's the original airing of grievances, if you will.
That's tough. Imagine 199 people all telling you what sucks about you, and you have to stand there and take it.
You do, yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much like social media nowadays.
I mean, I think the thought behind it was smart. I think the thought behind it was, by doing this, we make sure that no resentment or anger or issues build up over time and become damaging to the community.
Yeah, but I'm sure they didn't use the sandwich method, where you put like a compliment,
right?
A complaint and a compliment, like to soften the blow.
Sandwich method. Oh no.
That's how it's called.
Is it?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah, that makes more sense. But that's how they did it. And they also had free love to make up for it. But the free love also had quite a lot of rules.
A lot of anger fucking, I suppose.
So much. Things got real hot and heavy after those mutual criticism sessions. So there were a lot of rules. If you didn't pick up on it by now, if you are listening with children, this is the time to have them put their earmuffs on. So primarily, the Oneida Community, they didn't just want anyone having children. In fact, if you wanted to have a child, that would have to be decided by a committee, and you would have to get permission. You couldn't just meet someone at the community, fall in love, have all the sex, and then have babies. You could meet someone, fall in love, and have sex. But in order to prevent loads of pregnancies, they practiced male continence. Again, we're going to get more specific, so if the kids are still in the car, listen, you've been warned. So Noyes believed that the pleasure of sex and procreation were sort of different issues. He was aware that pregnancy took an incredibly heavy toll on women. In his defense, in his own personal life, he and his wife had suffered the loss of many, many pregnancies and stillbirths. And so from that experience, he very much understood the health necessity of birth control, which at that time, you have to think, is incredibly radical, right? To be a Christian in the 1800s saying, actually, hang on, we don't want to just procreate. Do you know what I mean? I think it was so devastating. They had so many stillbirths that I think he just felt like for his wife's sanity, he didn't want ever to have her risk having another child because the grief was too much. And I think we can all understand that. I don't think everyone then starts a sex cult to work around that, but, he's a dreamer. He furthermore believed that not only should men not reach orgasm and ejaculate because of the risk of pregnancy, but he believed that doing so would drain a man's vitality and eventually make you ill.
Also, I have to say, I know back then they weren't aware, but please don't try this method to prevent unwanted pregnancies, because we know that you don't need to orgasm as a man to have
semen. That's exactly right.
Coming out of you that already carries sperm.
That's exactly right. And sexually transmitted diseases. So
even on top, yeah.
Exactly. It's not safe. The pull-out method is not. But, for the time, he also believed that what men and women wanted in sex were different things. He thought that what men wanted was to literally sort of get in and out of there as often as possible, and women wanted a longer, more intimate experience. And so this was sort of the perfect way to ensure that everybody got what they wanted. And it does seem like from a sexual satisfaction point of view, people were pretty happy with that.
He's not wrong. We know that oxytocin hits different and
that's
stronger
right.
in women.
That's exactly
in
right.
connection with sex, yeah.
Yep, he wasn't wrong. This is the thing. He had a lot of his ideas are smart and are right on target. He's an early feminist. There's no question. The fact that he understood that, I don't want my wife I still want to be with my wife, but how do I do this in a way that maybe she doesn't have to go through this, that.
Yeah.
It's like we always say, people are complex. Now, here's where we're going to like him less. So the way they did this is younger men in the community are trained by postmenopausal women on how to go about this. The young boys, I have to say boys, because I think this started around the age of 14, which,
oh my,
that's a boy. So they would be introduced to postmenopausal women and trained as to how to go about this practice. So there would not be as many accidental pregnancies in this case, there wouldn't be any, hopefully, accidental pregnancies during the learning process, right? Another aspect of this is once you had sort of, graduated from sexy time with only the older ladies in the group and were able to control yourself, if you did slip up and have an accident, that would absolutely be part of the public shaming during the next criticism meeting.
Oh my.
So no pressure.
I'm sorry, I have to circle back about ejaculation for men and the drain of their vitality or what it was, because it reminded me of something I read, and I'm sorry that I have to mention the Beach Boys again and the Wilson brothers, but this is something I read in a biography about Brian Wilson. I even think it was the one he wrote himself, the first one he wrote himself during his Landy era. It's something, I don't know, if you know, you know. Do you know any?
No, I don't know.
So during his drug craze days in the late 60s, where he didn't get out of bed most of the time, Brian Wilson wanted to have sex every day, but he said he never wanted to ejaculate because he thought that his creativity and his life force would be drained from him if he ejaculates.
Oh, all right.
That sounds like torture to me. I don't know.
Listen, we don't recommend any of this. This is not. Yeah. Yeah. None of this is healthy.
No ejaculation at all. Like, not even.
Yeah. No, none for men in the Oneida community. Like, there was none. Like, you weren't allowed to complete anything by yourself. Nothing.
No?
No.
Okay, that is torture.
No, they literally never, they just didn't. But that's how they believed that they reached perfection. Like, that was the thing that they felt made them clean.
Huh.
So it was pretty, it was pretty forward thinking at the time. As we said, women within the community had so much more self-agency than other women might. But as we said, this is where it gets even more problematic. So you know that the boys of the group had to learn how to have intercourse with older women. Well, of course, that meant that the young girls were being taught by older men. So all of the young girls in the community would be initiated by Noyes and the other much older men in the group who could control themselves.
I have to say I don't find one more horrible than the other. It's both horrible on the same level, in my opinion.
100% agree. 100% agree. Now, if you wanted to have a baby, as we said, you would petition a committee and you would be matched based on your physical and moral qualities. You could also go and say, I'd like to have a baby with this person, and they might say no, but you can have one with this person. If you were selected, you would get to keep your baby with you until the baby was around a year old. And then once the baby was weaned and you weren't breastfeeding anymore, the baby would be taken from you to be raised by the rest of the community in the children's wing at the mansion.
Okay, I have a question just real quick. Having a partner for reproduction chosen for you, do eugenics also come into play here, or was it just like chosen on another level?
1000% eugenics. So they called it stirpiculture is the term that they used for it. I think it's the first instance of eugenics in the United States, but don't 100% quote me on that. So for the I almost said breeding program, Jesus, for the what would be the term?
I mean, but that
would be what it, yeah.
Unfortunately, what it is,
that's, right. So for the program, in the Oneida program, 58 women and 38 men of there were about 200 members roughly, I think. So 58 women and 38 men participated in the program. And of the 58 approved births, 9 were the children of Noyes himself. So that's not a crazy high number.
I mean, we've known other cult leaders to have way more children.
Right. I was kind of expecting them to say, like, of the 58 babies born, 50 were Noyes, is kind of what I was expecting. But honestly, this could be its own hours-long episode, and I really, really encourage people to look more into it. Over time, I don't know if I get into this later. So over time, they had a member who was an inventor, and they invented this steel trap that brought a ton of money in to the community. They also developed silverware. That was something that they made.
Is a seal trap?
A steel trap.
A steel trap. I was like trapping seals.
I don't know I think it was a mouse trap, but they had people within the community who had skills, and then over time they stopped it with the free love. They kind of abandoned that They kind of abandoned a lot of the cultier behavior, if that makes sense. But people still live at the mansion, and you can still visit it. And we might talk a little bit more about that down the line. But that is the basis, the origin for Grandma's tableware is this sex cult in upstate New York, and it's a B&B. I totally want to go. It's on my list.
I had no idea. I'm big into the 1960s, always been, and we know a lot of cults started back then. And they're basically pretty much the same ideas, right? And again, that's why I love history so much, to see some things have always been like this. Some things will never change. It's just so fascinating. Like technology evolves, yes, but the basic ideas of humanity and what we like and dislike, they just always kind of rotate.
This is why it is so important to save your classic pieces of generational clothing.
1000%. Also, everything for your kitchenware.
Yes.
That's a whole other discussion.
Oh my goodness.
We can do it for the Patreon.
Yeah, let's talk about that in Patreon. Okay. So this is the Oneida Community. Okay. So now let's talk about Let's talk about the kind of time Charles had at Oneida. So he arrives at this free love commune and he finds no love. He's not a bad-looking man, but he does have crazy eyes. He would be played by, I thought I had a picture of him. He would be played, I think, by like Willem Dafoe. Like, you know what I mean? The crazy eyes that Willem Dafoe does. Mm-hmm. That is similar crazy eyes to Guiteau. But he's also got blue eyes. So he gets to Oneida, and really, it's like sexy time all the time. And the women have a choice in their sexual partners. And Charles is dismayed when his nickname becomes Charles Get Out. Like, Charles, get out.
Ouch. That's some deep burn, being rejected at a free love commune. But also, if his nickname was Charles Get Out, maybe he was like the creepy guy who wanted to watch.
1000%. Also, he was the guy who was like, well, hang on, ladies, everybody get in line, I'm sure, like the moment he arrived. You know, Charles always thought that he was sincerely believed that he was the best thing at the party. Yeah. So Charles is there for about 5 years and no one wants to engage in anything with him. They're just absolutely hard pass. He leaves and he tries to start up a newspaper about the Oneida community while living in Hoboken, but that didn't go anywhere. So he goes back to the Oneida community, tries again, leaves again, and then he decides to sue Noyes and the community, saying that he wants money back for all of the work that he's done for them these last 5 years. He says that if they don't give him this money, he is going to blackmail them. He's got all kinds of information and he's going to show the world what they're doing. And so Noyes writes back and he says, that's fine. Go ahead. Tell the truth about us and we'll tell the truth about you. So he just bails. He runs away. Now we're going to leave Oneida. Although I think that's also when he was trying to sue them. I think that's also when John Noyes called him a lazy masturbator, which is like the deepest, sickest burn of all time. If you were in the Oneida cult, the Oneida commune, and you're called a lazy masturbator, I think that is the worst insult ever. All right, so we're going to leave Oneida, and I'm telling you, if I haven't convinced you already, it is worth further reading if you are interested and have the time. But now we're going back to Charles Guiteau, who leaves Oneida and goes to live with his sister and brother-in-law, Francis and George Scoville. Frances is the older sister who more or less raised Charles after his mother died. He calls her Frankie. And so he goes to Chicago and takes his brother-in-law up on the offer to work in his law office. But after a few months, he's bored, and so he decides to move to New York because he thinks he's going to get a position as an editor at one of his favorite newspapers. It's like a newspaper magazine. This is a really, really common theme we see over and over again with Charles Guiteau. He doesn't think, let me write to the paper and see if a position is available. He thinks, let me drop everything and go to them, and they will surely hire me immediately to run the place, is where his brain goes immediately.
He has the opposite of the imposter syndrome.
He does. I need some of what he has.
Yeah.
I once apologized to someone when they stepped on my foot because I was in the way. He goes out there and he's like, hi, I'm here to be your editor. And they're like, you know what? We could use somebody to sell newspaper subscriptions. He's so angry. He just has these the huge inflated ego, which competes with this deluded sense of entitlement. And then he's also got these delusions of grandeur. And he's just this truly insufferable human, right? Like, he is an overcooked pork chop that the dog won't eat. And he thinks he's filet mignon. Is there anything more unappealing than someone who never stops talking about how amazing they are. Like, I'm so amazing. Let me, like, just someone who brags constantly.
With nothing to back it up.
Nothing to back it up. Let me just brag about this, that. And it is a mental health red flag, right? We know this today. But oh my God. So yeah, he's upset when he's told that they have a job selling subscriptions. He's very salty.
I mean, everybody else would be like, oh, great, I have a foot in the door and I could try to work my way up.
No, he will never work his way up, ever. He will never really work. He just wants things given to him because he thinks he deserves them. So the newspaper subscriptions thing doesn't work out. This is also the time when he's blackmailing Oneida at the same time. He's kind of looking for any money he can get, really, without doing any work. So now it's early 1868, and he is once again completely broke. And so he goes back to his sister and brother-in-law, who, can we just say, are absolute angels, Frankie and George. And he once again works for George as a law clerk. And while doing that, he literally just manages to squeak by and pass the bar. He has one case in which his client loses, and then he mostly works as a dirty bill collector. So basically, he's an attorney. Someone comes to him and says, you know, I have this unpaid bill and my children are starving, and I'll give you 10% of it if you go and get that money for me, like as my attorney. And so he would go, he would get the money, he would pocket all the money, and then he would be like, sorry, bad news. That guy's dead. You're never going to see that money again. He's just keeping the money. Or like, depending on what he would get away with, he'd be like, well, I was able to recover half and that's the best work. You know what I mean? And so he's just skimming money any way he can. He is a thief. In 1869, he marries a librarian named Annie, who he met at the YMCA. She ran the library there. And poor Annie had unfortunately been attracted to what she saw as his religious piety, because there was a lot of that. He was preaching. He's a whole lot of bad. So now it's 1872 and they are relocating so that Charles can hide from the growing number of angry clients and debtors, like bill collectors, because he's also not paying any of his bills with that money. So he's going after people who owe money, but then he's got people coming after him for money owed. He's physically and emotionally abusing Annie right from the beginning of the relationship. He's incredibly physically violent, and he likes to lock her in a freezing closet overnight. He also likes to drag her around by her hair if she doesn't do what he wants quickly enough. In 1872, Charles throws his political support behind Horace Greeley. If you are sort of like, hey, that name sounds familiar, the quote, "Go west, young man," about westward expansion and the gold rush and all that jazz, that was him. He's the founder and editor of the New York Tribune and was a one-time candidate for president. This is the guy that Charles Guiteau likes. This is the guy he wants nominated for the same election Garfield would be nominated in. And so he writes speeches in his favor. He goes to all of the public campaign events for Horace Greeley. He relentlessly pressures anyone who knows him to help him get an ambassadorship to Chile from Greeley for all the work he's done on his behalf. So he's like, listen, I went to all your rallies. I want to live in Paris now on the government side. Literally, this is what he thinks is coming to him.
The audacity.
Well, it does seem like really quite a leap, because it is. We also have to remember that the American government at the time was very much a spoils system. And I'm going to quote Wiki on what this is. It is, quote, "A political party, after winning an election, gives government jobs to its supporters, friends, which is cronyism, and relatives, which is nepotism, as a reward for working toward victory and as an incentive to keep working," end quote. This is something that happens regularly all the time. It's just that no one would ever think that going to a couple of events and making a speech no one heard would give you an ambassadorship to anything.
Yeah, plus, I mean, Not to a guy like him, I suppose.
No.
You still have to have some social skills. It's especially as an ambassador. It would be great if you know, like, social cues.
I know. He's like, I want the ambassadorship to Chile. And they're like, do you speak Spanish? And he's like, absolutely not.
Do you know how to talk to people and make friends easily? No.
Would people say you're nice to sit next to at a formal dinner? No? He knows all kinds of tricks with a spoon. Anyway, it's 1874 and Annie is just so fed up with him. She's being abused. They're running from creditors. She wants out. And this is amazing because he's like, okay, fine.
Oh my God, thank God.
I know. I think actually the reason he says fine is because he needs to do better than her. He wants a society wife. He wants to find someone wealthy to help him like complete his vision to be given an ambassadorship.
I mean, of course, you need a very representable wife.
Yeah, obviously. Yes. So Annie gets out. But the problem is you can't just get a divorce because your husband is beating you up. That's not like, sorry, that's not good enough. And again, maybe the only decent thing he does in his entire life. He pays one of the regular ladies of the evening he visited to go into the courtroom and testify that he regularly cheated on his wife, and that allowed him to get a divorce. So Annie gets out, Annie gets her divorce, and Charles has syphilis. And he's getting even more religiously deluded, which is a bad combination. If you remember our episode on John List, we get into some of the really, really terrible ramifications of syphilis on the brain in that one. And also them treating it with malaria. And we're going to talk about malaria later in this story. All right, so Charles is now single and he's ready to mingle. He wants to travel the country. Sorry, I couldn't. I had to. It was the migraine made me do it. Travel the country preaching a new gospel. And in a real pot meat kettle situation, or what the professionals call projection, his equally insane hyper-religious father, who, by the way, also believed in faith healing, so he believed on like the laying on of hands to cure you, and he also believed that you could maybe live forever. He believed that his son was, in fact, literally possessed by the devil. On a sad note, Noyes did write to Charles's father, and in the letter he did say that he was praying for Charles as he prays for his own son, who is in an asylum. And, I already talked about the fact that he was a lazy masturbator. I'm like, don't get too sad. My notes say don't get too sad. He was a lazy masturbator.
I forgot to ask before. Does it mean he's lazy and a masturbator, or is he lazy at masturbating? I'm so unsure because it's a free love cult.
He's just terrible at all. Yeah, because masturbating wasn't allowed because orgasm wasn't allowed and ejaculation wasn't allowed for men.
True.
And also you were expected to work. They all worked very hard. I think the good folks at Oneida worked real hard, but also partied real hard for the time. And he did neither. He was he was just a lazy masturbator, which is, I think, the worst thing you could be called in the Oneida cults, right? Today, I feel like people in the Facebook group are all going to want a t-shirt that just says lazy masturbator. But back then...
100%.
But back then, I think it was like the deepest of deep burns. You're lazy and you masturbate.
Did he have hairy palm of his hands?
Obviously, Johanna. That's what happened.
Was his spine starting to dissolve?
It was. It was. That's right. We just have to remember these things before we get too sad about him, because he's the worst. Later on, when questioning Guiteau's criminal sanity, the question of whether or not he inherited mental illness, this comes up a lot in trial, y'all. Every time there's a situation where someone might have been mentally ill, there is an inordinate amount of time trying to trace, who's to blame. Where did it come from?
It's always the mother's fault.
In this case, they thought it was the dad. They're like, well, his dad really is a lot, isn't he? Which goes to tell you that the mother, if they all thought it was the father, and the mother had obvious postpartum psychosis for 15 years, then how bad was the dad? Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, that's bad.
Sounds bad.
Right? Okay, so this is a story coming up that I'm not 1,000% sure is true, but you have to hear it because you do hear it and it pops up in other stuff. So Charles's brother, John, he's being questioned about Charles's actions and whereabouts because people are trying to find Charles. And so they're reaching out to John to say like, hey, where is your brother? We need our money. And so John writes a letter to his brother where he encourages him to stop these practices, get back on the right side of the law. All of this is factual. We know that this is factual. There is a website called Touring Ohio that has this as a response. And I think it might be true, but I had to share it. So Charles writes the following response to his brother. Quote, find $7 enclosed, stick it up your bunghole and wipe your nose on it, and that will remind you of the estimation in which you are held by Charles J. Guiteau. Sign and return the enclosed receipt, and I will send you the money, but not before that, and that, I hope, will end our acquaintance. End quote. So I think that sounds like him.
It sounds totally like him.
It does.
I'm sure the brother was thrilled to receive such a letter.
Yeah.
Did it indeed end all relationship between the siblings?
He did. His brother, I think, had just had enough. He'd had enough. So the next time that Guiteau is arrested, he again calls his sister, Frankie, to come bail him out, which, again, she does. Now, her husband, George Scoville, he was a prominent Chicago attorney, and they came from a really good, well-to-do, well-respected family. Charles calls her, they bail him out, they take him back to their home on Lake Street in Oak Park in Chicago. And there, while living with the Scovilles, in the spring of 1875, something happens to absolutely terrify Frances.
Okay, but I do have to ask, did they also invent the ranking of
the
spiciness?
Heat? I'm not sure. I keep wondering if there's a link between them, and I have to believe that there is. I'm going to say yes, that they are related, and I'm going to look more into it. Or someone else, I bet, in the group can and tell us.
Attorney at day, secret chili tester at night.
I'll look into this for next week. Yeah, I'll look into it for next week. We'll answer the Scoville question. I feel like I should know this. I watch a lot of Hot Ones. It's one of my favorite YouTube shows. Okay. So anyway, it's there at the Scoville home in the spring of 1875 when something happens to really, truly terrify Frances. Charles is chopping wood with an axe, and all of a sudden, a look came over his face, and he raised the axe and went to attack her. So she runs for it. And to her credit, she goes and finds a doctor to come and examine her little brother, who she has raised. The physician, Dr. Rice, tells Frances that he believes that Charles is insane and that he should be committed to an asylum. This isn't the first time the family has heard this, and I did later read some contemporary news articles, also the trial transcripts from the time that were criticizing her for the fact that he was not in an asylum. It was sort of like, well, they told you to put him in an asylum. There's no question that he needed to be in an asylum. There's no question at all. So often we talk about how most of the time people who are very mentally ill are much more likely to need our protection.
Also, it's so difficult if it's your family member that you love.
This
Probably,
is it.
I'm not sure how their relationship was, but she kept helping him, so I'm sure she kind of felt after the mom died, she had this position of taking care of him.
Of course. The thing was, she agreed that he needed to be in an asylum. She was very, very worried about him. But the problem is that we know how difficult making a mentally ill adult realize, number one, that they're actually ill and need help is still a problem. Never mind trying to get them to agree there's a problem and seek treatment. That is a heartbreaking, soul-destroying challenge today. And when you compare to the treatment options and asylums at the time, I'm just saying that it makes me a little salty that they're trying to blame his sister for any of this because she was trying very hard to get him into a safe place. I think she probably had the finances to do it. You know, I think he could have been somewhere very nice and safe. But of course, before she can come up with a plan to get him treatment, he runs off again in the middle of the night and starts another life in another town, like he does over and over and over again, right? This is what he does. Every time he's caught up, every time he's found out, he just moves on and starts again. So now he's working as a preacher. Now he is pretending to be a preacher, and he travels around, and he's basically parroting all of the ideals of noise and the Oneida community. But he's, of course, claiming that all of these thoughts are his own. None of it is any good. He's rambling. He's incoherent a lot of times. He's clearly in a psychotic episode, right? There's no question. And he just constantly goes back to a life of petty crime and theft over and over again. So in 1880, Charles has to flee Boston, where he's been failing as an insurance salesman, for swindling people, and he's under suspicion again by the Boston police because he's a thief.
Of course.
Of course he is. On June 11th, Guiteau boards the SS Stonington in Stonington, Connecticut, which is a lovely, lovely, lovely town, and his steamer is bound for New York. Also on the water that day was the paddle steamer SS Narragansett. And Nancy Finley writes this excerpt from the ConnecticutHistory.org website. She says, quote, "By 11:30 p.m. on the night of the crash, most of the passengers on both vessels were asleep. They included businessmen traveling between New York, Providence, and Boston, and families bound for summer resorts along the New England coast. Conditions were crowded, with many passengers sleeping on benches and on the deck as well as in their berths and cabins. Out on Long Island Sound, the night was so dark and foggy that no lights were visible, and the ships repeatedly sounded their whistles to indicate their positions. Once the westbound Stonington passed the mouth of the Connecticut River and was about 3 miles off Cornfield Point in Old Saybrook, the seaman at her wheel heard the whistle of the eastbound Narragansett off her bow. Moments later, there was a terrific crash as the Stonington plowed into the other vessel, ripping a huge hole in her starboard side. Water began to pour in, and a gas meter exploded, starting a fire that quickly raged out of control. The Stonington was also damaged and was taking on water, but crews managed to patch the leaks with canvas and boards, and with the ship's pumps going full blast, the vessel was in no immediate danger of sinking. Terrified passengers crowded the decks of both steamboats, while both crews attempted to launch lifeboats and life rafts. Some passengers on the Narragansett found themselves trapped in their cabins as the vessel foundered and the passageways filled with smoke and flames. Others leapt from the deck into the water to escape the fire and drowned before they could be picked up by one of the lifeboats. Their names and stories made headlines. John Riley, a first baseman with the Cincinnati Stars, spent over an hour in the water before being rescued. Emily Dix, the wife of a Brooklyn, New York broker, watched as her 3 children and their Irish nursemaid all drowned after their lifeboat capsized. Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Stilson of Atlanta, Georgia, survived the wreck, but their 2 young children perished in the fire. The Stonington was able to limp back to port. Several boats came to aid the Narragansett, which required towing back to port. Because the ship did not keep an accurate passenger list, the number of deaths resulting from the collision was never accurately determined. It is likely that between 50 and 70 people lost their lives that night. Following the inquest into the collision between the 2 Stonington Line steamships, the steamboat company paid a fine for failing to adhere to the rules governing steamboat commerce, and both captains lost their licenses. The newspapers criticized the Narragansett's captain for ordering his crew into the boats and then leaving the ship himself while many passengers remained on board. In addition, he failed to have sufficient officers and watchmen on board. Simultaneously, the newspapers also criticized the captain of the Stonington for failing to provide adequate aid to the sinking Narragansett. Ominously, one passenger on the Stonington, Charles Guiteau, took his survival of the crash as a sign that he was destined for a higher purpose. End quote. So, for most people, that would have been a very, very harrowing tale of survival, right? This devastating crash takes place. This incredibly traumatic event happens. All of these lives are lost in these truly heartbreaking ways. And Charles Guiteau doesn't think that this is something terrible that he survived. He thinks this is something that was planned by God to point out to him how special he was, that he had been spared for a higher purpose. And he sets his crazy eyes on James Garfield. Meanwhile, Guiteau changes his party affiliation to Republican, and then on August 6, 1880, he delivers a speech to maybe 24 people. The speech is called Garfield versus Hancock, in which he discusses why he believes that his candidate, Garfield, should get the nomination. The problem with the speech is that it was originally a speech that he had written in favor of Ulysses S. Grant. And when Garfield shocks everyone by getting that presidential nomination that he wasn't even looking for, Guiteau just went ahead and changed the name from Grant to Garfield. He just, what is it, like copy, replace, find, replaced?
He probably didn't even write it completely new. He just scratched out the names, right?
Exactly right, yeah. So then when Garfield wins the election, Guiteau's like, see, I knew I could make him win. And he believes in his core that he has done this and he is responsible for Garfield getting this nomination. And that in return, he is going to be owed a pretty sweet job. Can you even...
I can't. No. Whatever you're saying, I can't.
So this is where we are. This is probably a good place to stop because now we know what we need to know roughly. And again, there's a lot of information out there, and I encourage everyone to have fun with it because history is always more interesting than you think it is. Next week's episode, we will talk about the election and the assassination, and I'm going to really do my best to make next week's episode totally family friendly. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. All right.
Before I tell you my something good, Jem got his doggy sunglasses. He's so cute. He looks like a space beagle.
Oh my god, space beagle.
No, we're training. He's a good sport, but he's not impressed.
I think he looks like a ski beagle.
ski alien beagle. Yeah. Alien ski beagle.
He's so cute.
I already posted a photo in the Facebook group. I'm gonna keep you updated on how he's adjusting. The meds are working really well. Like, he's still shaking sometimes, but he has a good night's sleep and it's so much better. I'm so happy and glad about that. For my something good, I joined a gym last week. I haven't talked about it lately, but I started running last year and I wanted to run a half marathon in April, but I got sick 2 weeks before the marathon.
Oh, you were
so I was
sick.
Missing some essential training time and I'm not there yet to be, well, I don't need those 2 weeks. I needed those 2 weeks. So I said, okay, let's do it next year because I don't want it to be torture.
No, you want to enjoy it. It's not supposed to be punishment.
Exactly. I was a little bit sad because I did really follow the training plan really well. I did put a lot of effort in. I lost a lot of weight lately and started running, and that's good for cardio and your stamina, but I'm really I'm having trouble with my shoulders from, sitting and typing on the computer and stuff like that. And I didn't go to the gym in 4 years, I think. So I started with strength training and it's good. I like it.
Nice.
It's really good. And I'm gonna try to go twice a week.
Nice.
In addition to the running. So that's my something good. Doing something for my body to keep it healthy and strong.
Yes. That is very good.
Which is so important the older we get, especially for women, because osteoporosis and these kind of things.
I know. I'm terrible.
No, you're not. You finished did you already get your medal? But
I did. I was just going to say, that has to be my something good. It came. I haven't opened it yet. I've been waiting to record it so that you can see what it looks like at the same time that I do. It came fast. Johanna signed me up for a Conquer challenge, and it took me forever to actually get done the mileage, but I did it. And I got this really cute Scooby-Doo medal. I haven't opened it yet though. I've seen the outside of the case, but I didn't open it. I'm going to make a little video so you can see what it looks like at the same time I do.
But it's motivating, right?
It is. Yeah.
Awesome.
I got my ears pierced again. So I'm going through I think this is my midlife crisis is happening and I'm embracing it. I feel like a huge percentage of our friends went through a midlife crisis and bought a Jeep. I feel like that's the new Corvette. It's a Jeep Wrangler because people have kids now. Nobody wants to try to get a car seat into the back of a Corvette. Come on. It's all about the Jeeps. But what's happening for me is I took one of my nieces, Sophia. She's been waiting very patiently to get her ears pierced, and I insisted that we go to a real piercing studio because my ears are so uneven and kind of wonky from the gun And I know that it's a privilege to be able to afford to go to like a real piercer and have it done. But if you're able to do it, I so highly recommend it. We went to a rock star in Jamaica Plain and they were absolutely fantastic. Everyone there was amazing. And I now have 2 holes in my ear. I got a second piercing, which for me, I'm like, you guys, this is wild. I'm a bad girl. I got 2 holes in my ears. And wait, though, it gets worse. Then I just had to go get my hair done because I have this one patch of gray. It's not pretty. It's not a streak like a Cruella streak or a Stacey London streak, which would be great. It's like a patch that makes me look bald if any kind of light source hits me, if that makes sense, because my gray is the same white as my skull. So it just reads as no hair there. But there's not enough of it to just embrace it and be gray. I look like a baby skunk. It's not good. So long story short, I was like, you know what? What if we did bangs? So then I cut some curtain bangs and now I'm planning my first tattoo.
Perfect.
I know. I'm embracing my midlife crisis. I'm having holes punched in things. It's great. It's great.
I think I'm having a reversed midlife crisis because I was the wild party girl all my life. And now my midlife crisis is, sewing, gardening, walking in the woods, living the quiet life and going to bed at 9:00. That's my midlife crisis.
Oh, girl. I went to bed so frequently lately. I feel so bad. I say to Paul, like, it's like 9:00. I'm just going to go to bed now. The thing that irks me is that I feel like I'm missing out because one of my absolute favorite things in the whole world is reading before bed. I love to read before bed. I used to get in trouble for it all the time as a kid. Like I'd hide flashlights and I say trouble, but sometimes legit, my parents would be like, it's 2 a.m. Like, come on, go to bed. But yeah, that's my favorite thing. And I'm so tired that I get into bed and I read a paragraph and I'm out and it's taking me such a long time. I usually read like a book a week and lately it's forget about it. So It's all right. Listen, there are worse problems to have.
All right. I'd say that's it for this week.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please do us the huge favor. Go to your podcast app and leave us a rating and or review, or on Spotify and YouTube, a comment. That always helps us out. And as Annie said before, it's the moral support that counts. If you want to find another way to support us, you can always join our Patreon. Our next live get-togethers for the murder tier are going to be by the end of the month, which is going to be the 29th of June. For next month, June month. And the monthly miscellaneous that is available live for murder and mystery tier is gonna be on 2nd of June.
That's right. And we'll have some topics to chat about for that episode.
Yes. It's going to be good. And
so take a look at the Patreon feed for that information.
Exactly. And if you don't have time to make it to the lives, you can always rewatch it later on because of the new system we set up.
That's right. And leave any thoughts or comments under the post if you can't make it, and we'll include them in the conversation. So you're still part of it, even if you're not able to be there when we do it live.
Yes. And for the murder tier people, the 2024 stickers are ordered and are going to start sending them out once they arrive. Everyone in the murder tier will receive the 2024 stickers.
Woohoo!
One of the perks. Yes.
Nice. Very exciting.
Other ways to support us. Share our content, recommend us to people who are looking for our kind of podcast. There are weirdos like us out there, like you, who enjoy murder, mystery, and the macabre throughout history.
That's
right. We just have to find our people.
With also a lot of trivia. We're very trivia-driven. Yes. In fact, I have a Jeopardy special planned. It's exciting.
And that's it. Please tell your pets we said hi. All your dogs, cats, guinea pigs, real pigs.
Anything fanged.
I don't even know. Dragons, lizards.
Sure. If it's got fangs, if it's got feathers, if it's got fins.
Whatever.
We love it.
Yeah. We love all of them. We always want to see photos. Hug them, cuddle them, and treat them with respect and be very kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being. And the most important and hardest part of it all, be kind to yourself once in a while.
Yeah, that's right. That is absolutely the hardest thing. As always, we like to close with my favorite Winston Churchill quote, which is, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.
Charles Guiteau didn't have a problem with being kind to himself.
No, he was very kind to himself. He was very kind. Do you think we talked too much about the sex cult? There can never be too much sex cult. Who am I kidding? All right. Bye.